The meeting had been running for 40 minutes when the door opened. Nobody had knocked. The handle simply turned, and the door swung inward, and everyone in the room looked up expecting another manager, and instead found a 5-year-old in a pink dress with a drawing book pressed against her chest, standing in the doorway of the most important meeting that had taken place in this hotel in 3 years. She looked at the room. The room looked at her. General Manager Park Sung-tae, who had been mid-sentence when the door opened, went completely still. The 2 regional directors beside him exchanged a look. The hotel's head of HR cleared his throat. And Kwon Min-seok, seated at the head of the table, looked at the child with an expression that nobody in the room could read, because Kwon Min-seok's expressions were not designed to be read by people who worked for him. The child looked at each person at the table. She was doing something specific with her eyes, taking inventory. Then she found the face she was looking for. Park Sung-tae. She walked directly to the center of the room. She stopped. She looked at him with the specific, complete certainty of someone who had heard everything through a wall and had decided that walls were not a good enough reason to stay quiet. She said, "Everything you just said about my mama is a lie, and I can prove it." 3 months earlier, Imani Adeyemi had been working at the Kwon Grand for 2 years and 4 months. She knew every corridor on floors 1 through 7. She knew which room had the shower that ran cold for the first 90 seconds. She knew which window in the east wing had a seal that let in a draft when the wind came from the north. She knew that the linen trolley with the squeaky wheel was always the one left outside room 412, and she knew not to use it on the nights when the guest in 412 had a 3 a.m. call with Tokyo, because she had noticed once that he left a handwritten thank you note for the cleaner who didn't wake him, and she had decided to be that cleaner every time. She knew this hotel the way she knew her own flat. Completely. Without anyone noticing that she knew it. That was the thing about being invisible in a place. You learned it entirely. Park Sung-tae had been general manager for 14 months. He arrived with a specific energy that Imani had cataloged within the first week. The energy of a man who needed someone to be the reason things went wrong. Not because things went wrong often. Because in his particular management style, having someone to name when things went wrong was more useful than preventing things from going wrong in the first place. He had been looking at Imani since month 2. She did not know why at first. She thought it was the specific oversight that came with being a cleaner. Being looked at the way furniture was looked at when someone was deciding whether to rearrange the room. She understood later that it was something more specific. But by then, the damage had already started. Dara was 5 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's mouth, and an opinion about everything that she delivered with the specific matter of fact completeness of someone who had never learned that children were supposed to soften things. She carried a drawing book everywhere. Not because she had been told to. Because she had decided at age 3 that the world was interesting enough to document, and that the documentation required a permanent record. She drew everything she saw, with the specific faithful accuracy of someone who understood that details mattered. The date in the corner of every drawing. Always. Her grandmother had taught her that. If you draw something, Dara, write when you drew it, so the drawing knows where it belongs in time. She had never stopped. The morning of the meeting, Imani's childminder called at 6:47 a.m. Sick. The backup childminder was visiting her sister in Birmingham. Imani's shift started at 7:30. She stood in her kitchen for 4 minutes doing the specific calculation that single mothers did. The calculation that never had a clean answer. She called her supervisor. Park Sung-tae did not answer. She called the HR line. Voicemail. She looked at Dara eating toast at the kitchen table in her pink dress, drawing book already open beside her plate, drawing the toast. She made the only decision available. She told Dara 3 things on the bus. Stay in the supply cupboard on floor 3. Do not make noise. Do not open the door for anyone except Mama. Dara listened to all 3 instructions with the focused absorption she gave to important information. What if I need the toilet? There's a staff bathroom at the end of the corridor. Wait until you can't hear anyone in the hall. What if I finish my drawing book? You have 40 pages left. You won't finish. Dara looked at her drawing book. She looked at her mother. Okay, she said. The supply cupboard on floor 3 was comfortable enough. A folding chair that Imani had placed there quickly before her shift started. A granola bar. A juice box. The drawing book. Dara settled in with the specific practical adaptability of a child who had learned early that comfort was mostly a decision rather than a condition. She opened the drawing book. She drew the supply cupboard, the shelves of cleaning products, the folded towels, the specific quality of the light from the small window near the ceiling. She drew for 30 minutes before she heard the voices. The manager's office was directly on the other side of the supply cupboard wall. Dara had not known this. She knew it now. The wall was not thick. The voices came through clearly. She was not trying to listen. She simply heard. The first voice was Park Sung-tee's. She knew his voice. She had drawn him twice. Both times she had written at the top, "The man who is mean to Mama." He was talking about quarterly performance, about guest complaints, about a problem that was affecting the hotel's rating on the floors she cleaned. Then he said her mother's name. And everything he said after that was wrong. She did not move immediately. She sat very still the way she sat when she was deciding something. She heard him say lazy. She heard him say dishonest. She heard him say 3 guests had complained specifically about her mother's work this quarter. She heard him say he was recommending immediate termination. She looked at her drawing book. She turned to the drawing she had made 4 weeks ago. The one from the night she had been in the car with her mother when Mama went back for her forgotten phone. The hotel car park at midnight. 2 men. One in a hotel uniform. One in a dark coat. A white envelope. She had drawn it carefully because the light from the car park lamps had been interesting, and she liked the way shadows worked at night. At the top, "The man who is mean to Mama," with another man giving something. She turned to another drawing. From 3 weeks ago. She had been sitting quietly in the corridor while her mother cleaned the room at the end. She had drawn the housekeeping trolley. She had drawn Park Sung-tee coming out of room 407, putting something in his pocket. She had not understood what she was drawing at the time. She understood now. She stood up. She picked up the drawing book. She walked to the door of the supply cupboard. She opened it. She walked to the manager's office. She turned the handle. And that was how Dara Adeyemi came to be standing in the center of a room containing 7 hotel executives and the CEO of the Kwon Group at 9:43 on a Tuesday morning in October, holding a drawing book and telling the most powerful man in the building that everything his general manager had just said was a lie. The room held the specific silence of people recalibrating. Park Sung-tee's face showed 3 things in quick succession. Shock. Recognition. Something that was not quite fear, but lived next to it. Kwon Min-seok looked at the child. He had been looking at her since the door opened. Not with the impatience of someone whose meeting had been interrupted. With the specific quality of attention he gave to things that required it. He had looked at her and felt something move through him that was not part of any meeting he had ever prepared for. "What's your name?" he said. His voice was quiet. Not the performed quietness of a man managing a room. Simply quiet. The room noticed the difference. "Dara." "How old are you, Dara?" 5.5. "You said you can prove something." "Yes." He looked at the drawing book she was holding against her chest. "Is it in there?" "Yes." He looked at Park Sung-tee. Park Sung-tae's expression had settled into something careful. The specific careful expression of a man deciding how to manage a situation that had moved outside the territory he had planned for. "This is clearly not," Park started. "Sit down," Min-seok said. Not loudly. Park sat down. Min-seok looked at Dara. "Can you show me?" She walked to the head of the table. She put the drawing book in front of him. She opened it to the drawing from 4 weeks ago. The car park. The 2 men. The envelope. He looked at it. He looked at the date she had written in the corner. October 2nd. He looked at the drawing. Then he looked at Park Sung-tae. Something in his expression had changed. Not dramatically. The specific slight shift of a man for whom something that was a hypothesis has just become a certainty. "Turn the page," Dara said. He turned it. Room 407. The trolley in the corridor. Park Sung-tae coming out of the room. Something going into his pocket. The date. October 14th. He looked at this drawing for a long time. He turned the page again. Dara reached over and found the page she wanted. 3 drawings. All from different dates. All showing variations of the same thing. Park Sung-tae at a computer in the back office. The date on the screen visible in Dara's careful rendition. The same dates that appeared on the guest complaint forms that had been filed against Imani. Min-seok looked at these drawings. He looked at the 5-year-old standing beside him. "You drew all of these from memory." "I drew them when I saw them," she said. "I always draw what I see, and I always put the date." He looked at the HR director. The HR director was already reaching for her laptop. He looked at the 2 regional directors. Both of them were looking at Park Sung-tae with the specific expression of people recalculating. He looked at Park. Park was looking at the drawing book. His expression had moved past careful into something more fundamental. "These are a child's drawings," Park said. "You cannot possibly." "Cross-reference the dates," Min-seok said to the HR director. She typed. The room waited. She looked up. She looked at Min-seok. She looked at the drawings. "The complaint submission timestamps match the dates on the drawings," she said carefully. "All 3 complaints were filed from the back office computer. The login credentials used she stopped, "were General Manager Park's." The room went very still. Park Sung-tae looked at the table. Dara looked at him with the specific, complete steadiness of a child who had said the true thing and was simply waiting for the adults to catch up. Subscribe to Afro-Korean love stories right now if you are new here. Drop your city and the time it is where you are. Because where Imani is right now while all of this is happening. And what Min-seok knows about her that she doesn't know he knows. Stay with me. This story has not reached its hardest moment yet. Imani was on floor 5 when her radio crackled. Mrs. Okafor from housekeeping saying her name in the specific careful tone that meant something had happened, and the something required her presence immediately. She took the lift to floor 3. She walked to the manager's office. She saw through the glass panel in the door that the room was full of people she had never expected to be in the same room. She saw the back of a small pink dress. Her hand went flat against the wall beside her. She pushed the door open. Every face in the room turned toward her. Dara turned. Her expression showed the specific combination of satisfaction and preemptive apology of someone who had done the necessary thing and understood it was going to require explanation. "Mama," she said. "Dara," Imani's voice was completely level, the specific levelness of someone managing something enormous through sheer will. "Come here." "I was helping." "Come here." Dara came. Imani put one hand on her daughter's shoulder and looked at the room. She looked at Park Sung-tae. She looked at the faces she did not recognize. She looked at the man at the head of the table. He was looking at her. not with the expression of someone seeing her for the first time. She did not notice this yet. "I'm sorry," she said. "Whatever she said or did in here, I take full responsibility. She was not supposed to be in the building. I had no childcare this morning and I couldn't reach anyone too." She stopped. "I'll pack my things." "You're not being dismissed," the man at the head of the table said. She looked at him. "I brought my child into a restricted area. That's a clear violation of." "Your general manager filed fraudulent guest complaints using his own login credentials to create grounds for your dismissal." He looked at her steadily. "Your daughter documented it, accurately, with dates." Imani looked at the table. She looked at Park Sung-Tae. Park was not looking at her. She looked at the drawing book open on the table. She recognized Dara's handwriting in the corner of every page. She recognized the drawings. She looked at her daughter. Dara was looking up at her with the specific expression of someone waiting to find out if what they did was right. "You drew all of this," Imani said quietly. "I draw everything," Dara said. "You know that." "You drew him. He was being mean to you. Mean things should be written down so people can't say they didn't happen." Imani pressed her lips together. The specific movement of a woman managing something that was trying to come out. She looked at the man at the head of the table. "I don't know who you are," she said. Something moved through his expression. "Kwon Min-seok," he said. "I own the hotel." The silence that followed had a specific quality. Imani looked at her daughter. Dara looked at Min-seok. "You're the big boss," she said. "Yes." She considered this. "Good," she said. "Then you can fix it properly." Park Sung-Tae was escorted from the building at 11:15 a.m. Not dramatically. The specific quiet efficiency of an organization removing something that had been identified as a problem and was being handled through the appropriate channels. 2 members of the security team. The HR director. His access card deactivated at 11:14. Imani stood in the corridor watching this with the drawing book under her arm because she had picked it up from the table without thinking about it and was now holding it the way you held something that had just changed everything. Dara was beside her. "Did it work?" Dara said. "It worked." "Good." Dara looked at the lift doors closing behind the security team. "He's been doing it for a long time, Mama. I have lots of drawings." Imani looked at her daughter. "How long?" she said. "Since October." Dara opened the drawing book. "Look." She showed her mother the drawings one by one. Not just the car park. Not just room 407. 26 drawings over 3 months. Each one dated. Each one faithful. Imani looked through them slowly. She had known something was wrong. She had known it the way you knew things you could not prove. The complaints that appeared on her file that she had no memory of the incidents they described. The guest in Fort Welve who left a note for the cleaner who didn't wake him, and how that note had been filed in Park's performance folder as evidence of a different outcome, one Imani had not produced. The specific accumulation of wrongness that she had been too afraid to name, because naming it required proof, and she had no proof. Her daughter had been drawing the proof for 3 months. Without knowing it was proof. Without knowing anything except that she drew what she saw, and she always put the date. Min-seok was still in the manager's office when his assistant found him. He was standing at the window, looking at the hotel car park. The same car park that appeared in a 5-year-old's crayon drawing, dated October 2nd. He had known about October 2nd since October 3rd. He had reviewed the security footage himself when an alert came through about an unauthorized meeting on hotel grounds. The footage had been poor quality. The timestamp confirmed a meeting took place. The identities of both men had been unclear on the recording. He had flagged it and continued the investigation through other channels. He had not known that a 5-year-old in the back seat of a car had drawn a cleaner version of the same meeting with a blue crayon and written the date in the corner. He thought about this for a long time. He thought about the specific faith of a grandmother who taught a child to always write the date on her drawings so they would know where they belonged in time. He thought about how much of what they had been trying to establish through official channels for 3 months had been sitting in a pink drawing book. His assistant appeared. The HR team needs you to sign off on the suspension documentation. In a minute. She waited. He kept looking at the car park. Find out where Mrs. Adeyemi is, he said. I need to speak with her. They brought her to a small meeting room on the 2nd floor. Not the manager's office. He had chosen this deliberately. She came in still in her uniform, still carrying the drawing book. Dara was with her. He had expected this and had not asked for Dara to wait elsewhere. Imani sat across from him. Dara sat beside her mother and opened the drawing book to a fresh page. She began drawing the meeting room. He watched her do this for a moment. She really does draw everything, he said. Everything, Imani confirmed, since she was 3. He looked at Imani. 2 years and 4 months, she had worked in this hotel. He had reviewed her file before coming to this property. Not because of anything related to Park. Because he reviewed files before visiting any property. Her file had been clean for the first 20 months. The complaints had started appearing in month 21. 3 in month 21. 2 in month 22. 4 in month 23. The pattern of escalation had been one of the things that flagged the anomaly to his internal audit team. Real complaints didn't escalate like that. Real complaints came sporadically. These had come with the specific regularity of someone building a case. He had come to this property to find out who was building it and why. He had not expected the answer to walk through a meeting room door at 5 years old, carrying a drawing book. I want to tell you something, he said. Imani looked at him with the specific careful attention of someone who had learned that things powerful men wanted to tell her were not always things she wanted to hear. I've been aware your file had anomalies for 6 weeks, he said. My audit team flagged the complaint pattern. I came here specifically to investigate it. She was quiet. I know that's not entirely reassuring, he said, because the investigation was ongoing, and during that time you were still living under a false record. Yes, she said, I was. I'm sorry for that. She looked at him. I need to tell you something else, he said. He paused. Not for effect. Because he was deciding how to say the next part honestly. 7 weeks ago, I was doing a private walkthrough of this property. After midnight, he looked at his hands. I was on the east corridor of the 4th floor at approximately 2:20 a.m. Imani looked at him. Something shifted in her expression. Something she was beginning to understand. A guest had collapsed in the corridor, he said. She had come out of her room and her legs had given out. She was on the floor when I turned the corner. Imani was very still. I was about to call for assistance, he said, but you were there before I reached her. You came out of the room you were cleaning and you were beside her within seconds. You called the ambulance. You sat with her on the floor of the corridor and held her hand and talked to her until the paramedics arrived. Imani looked at her own hands. Then you went back to work, he said, without telling anyone, without filing a guest assistance report, without asking for any acknowledgement that what you'd done was considerably beyond your job description at 2:30 in the morning. She was frightened, Imani said quietly. She needed someone to stay. I know, he said. I watched the whole thing from the end of the corridor. The meeting room was very quiet. Dara was drawing. Not looking up, but listening. She was always listening. You knew who I was, Imani said, before today. I knew your name, he said, and I knew what I had seen. When the complaints started appearing in your file, I knew they were wrong because what I had seen was not consistent with the person being described. She looked at him. Why didn't you? She stopped. 6 weeks, you've known for 6 weeks. The investigation needed to be done correctly, he said. If I had intervened without evidence, it would have been my word against his. The fraudulent complaints would still be on record. Any dismissal of Park without documented evidence would have been challenged and potentially overturned. He met her eyes. I needed the evidence to be airtight. I was still building it when your daughter walked into that meeting with 26 drawings and a date on every single one. Imani looked at the drawing book on the table between them. She opened it. She turned to the October 2nd drawing. The car park. The two men. The envelope. She looked at it for a long time. Who was the other man, she said, in the car park? Minsiok looked at the drawing. A representative from a competitor company, he said. They have been attempting to access our client database for 8 months. Park was providing internal access in exchange for payment. She turned to the drawing of room 407. What was he taking from the rooms? Guest information, contact details, corporate client records. He looked at the drawing. The envelope in the car park contained a payment and a list of rooms with high-value guests. He was being paid per record. She turned to the drawings of the back office. The computer screen, visible in Dara's rendering. And the complaints were filed to create grounds for your dismissal before you could remember clearly what you had seen in the car park. He paused. He underestimated how much you had actually seen, but more importantly, he did not know your daughter had drawn it. Imani looked at Dara. Dara was drawing them. Both of them, sitting across from each other at the table. The drawing book between them. She wrote something at the top. She looked up. Can I ask you something? She said to Minsiok. Yes. The lady Mama sat with on the floor, the one who fell. She tilted her head. Was she important to you? Minsiok looked at this child. He thought about the hotel, about the guest registry, about the name on the 4th floor booking from 7 weeks ago. The name that had been registered under a variation. Mrs. K-Yoon. He thought about his mother, who had been traveling the country, quietly visiting the properties in the portfolio. The way she had done since his father died and left her the hotels. The way she had done every year. The way he had only recently discovered. She still did at 71 years old because she said she could not trust reports and needed to feel a place herself. He thought about the call he had received at 2:47 a.m. His mother's voice, shaken but composed, telling him she had been unwell in the corridor. Telling him a young woman had sat with her on the floor and held her hand and talked to her until help arrived. Telling him she hadn't gotten the woman's name, but she had warm eyes, and she had spoken to her like she was a person rather than a problem. He looked at Dara. Yes, he said, she was very important to me. Dara nodded slowly. I thought so, she said. The way you looked at Mama when she walked into the big meeting, you already knew who she was. She turned the drawing book toward him. The new drawing. Him and Imani at the table. The drawing book between them. At the top. He already knew Mama was good. He just needed everyone else to know too. Drop a yellow heart right now. For Dara, who wrote the date on every drawing because her grandmother told her to. For Imani, who sat on a hotel corridor floor at 2:30 a.m. and held a stranger's hand because she was frightened and needed someone to stay. For Minsiok, who watched from the end of the corridor and remembered her name. Drop your city. Drop the time it is where you are. Stay with me. 3 days after the meeting. Imani had been told to take paid leave while the investigation concluded. She had spent the first day unable to sit still. The second day, she had called her mother in Lagos and told her everything. Her mother had listened to the whole story without interrupting. Then she had said, "The child who draws everything, I taught her that." "I know, Mama. I taught her to put the date so the drawing would know where it belongs in time." "I know." A long silence. "God works," her mother said simply. Imani had not said anything for a moment. "God works," she agreed. On the third day, Minsiok called. She had not saved his number. She did not need to. There was only one person, whose call she was half expecting and half not expecting simultaneously. "The investigation is complete," he said. "The formal findings will be issued to you by HR tomorrow morning. I wanted to tell you directly first." "Okay," she said. "Your file will be cleared of every complaint. The record will show no incidents against your name for the duration of your employment." "Thank you. There's also a formal apology from the hotel pending. That will come through HR as well." He paused. "I wanted to add one from me personally, not as the company. As the person who watched what you did in that corridor 7 weeks ago and should have moved faster to protect you from what happened after." She was quiet. "You were building a case," she said. "You said it needed to be airtight." "It did, but you worked under a false record for 6 weeks because I needed the evidence. I'm aware of what that cost you." Another pause. "I know what it means to come to work every day knowing something about you is wrong and not being able to prove it." She looked at the wall of her living room. Dara's drawings covering most of it. The hotel. The corridors. The guests. The city outside the bus window. 26 drawings that had proved what she had known for 6 weeks and could not say. "My daughter fixed it," she said. "Your daughter documented it," he said, and then walked into a room full of people who had the authority to act on what she showed them. He paused. "But she walked into that room because you raised her to believe that the truth was worth saying even when the room was frightening." Imani pressed her free hand flat against the wall, beside a drawing Dara had made of their kitchen. "At the top, the place where we are safe." "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything." "The woman in the corridor, the one who fell." She stopped. "She wasn't just a guest." A pause. A long one. "No," he said. "She was connected to you." "Yes." "How?" He said it simply. "My mother." The living room was very quiet. Imani thought about a woman on a hotel corridor floor at 2:30 a.m. Frightened. The specific frightened quality of someone whose body had let them down in a public place. She had not known her name. She had not known who she was connected to. She had sat down beside her because she was frightened, and frightened people needed someone to stay. "Is she all right?" Imani said. "She's well," he said. "She has a heart condition that she manages. The fall was a consequence of standing up too quickly. She was checked over at the hospital and released the same night." He paused. "She told me about you." "She didn't know my name." "She described you." A pause. Warm eyes. Spoke to her like she was a person rather than a problem. Stayed until the help arrived and then went straight back to work. He was quiet for a moment. "I knew who she was describing. I had just watched the whole thing." Imani closed her eyes briefly. She thought about the specific intersection of things that had to be exactly as they were for this moment to exist. The childminder who canceled. The supply cupboard beside the manager's office. The thin wall. Her mother in Lagos teaching Dara to write the date on her drawings. The grandmother who had given Dara the instinct to document the world exactly as she saw it. "Mr. Kwon," she said. "Min Seok," he said. She held this for a moment. "Min Seok, can I ask you something else?" "Yes." "Why are you calling me personally? You have an HR department. You have legal teams. You have people whose job is to handle exactly this kind of situation." A pause. "Because I wanted to," he said. The simplicity of it landed in a way that more complicated answers would not have. "Okay," she said. "I'd like to meet again," he said. "Not officially, not about the investigation, just," he stopped, found the honest word. "I'd like to meet again." She looked at Dara's drawings covering the wall. The hotel. The corridors. The city. The kitchen where they were safe. A new one that Dara had added just this morning. A man at the head of a table. A woman across from him. A drawing book between them. At the top. The beginning. "Dara already drew it," she said. "Drew what?" "She draws what comes next," Imani said. Before it happens, she doesn't know she's doing it. She just draws what she sees, and it turns out she sees further ahead than the rest of us. He was quiet. What did she draw? She called at the beginning. A long pause. That sounds right, he said. They met the following Saturday. Not at the hotel. A restaurant he had chosen for the same reason Hyun had chosen the family restaurant for Amara. Not to impress, but to make the thing about the people rather than the setting. A Nigerian restaurant in Peckham that he had found after spending 2 days researching Nigerian cuisine with the specific systematic thoroughness of a man who prepared for everything. Imani arrived and looked at the restaurant and looked at him. You research this, she said. I research things before I show up somewhere, he said. It seems the minimum. She looked at the menu. Can you even read this? The owner translated the specials for me when I called ahead. You called ahead. I wanted to make sure they had the dish you mentioned to the HR director during your statement. You said you hadn't eaten properly in 3 days, and that the one thing you wanted was your mother's egusi soup, and you couldn't make it yourself because you'd never quite mastered the ratio. Imani looked at him. You were listening to my HR statement for egusi soup references. I was listening to your HR statement for everything, he said. The egusi soup was a detail. She looked at the menu. She pressed her lips together. You're very particular, she said. Yes. Is that a problem? I don't know yet, she said honestly. He looked at her. I appreciate that answer more than a polite one, he said. Dara was with Imani's neighbor for the afternoon. Imani had told her she was meeting someone. Dara had said, the big boss. Yes. Good, she had opened her drawing book. I already drew it. I know, baby. Are you nervous? Imani had looked at her daughter. Yes, she said. Dara had looked up from the drawing book. Don't be, she said. He already knows you're good. You just need to find out if you know he's good too. At the restaurant, over food that was better than either of them had expected, Imani told him about her mother in Lagos. About the drawings. About the grandmother who had given Dara the habit of dadding everything. About the specific faith of a woman who believed that documentation was love because documentation said I was here, and this mattered, and I want you to know it. He told her about his mother. Not the billionaire version of his mother. The version who still visited hotel properties unannounced at 71 because she said she could not trust reports and needed to feel a place herself. The version who had called him at 2:47 a.m. from a hospital and said a young woman with warm eyes sat with me on the floor and talked to me like I was a person. The version who had told him 2 days ago when he told her what had happened, find that woman and don't let her disappear. She said that, Imani said. She said exactly that. Imani looked at her food. She thought about sitting on a hotel corridor floor at 2:30 a.m., holding a stranger's hand. Not because it was her job. Because the woman was frightened and needed someone to stay. She had not done it for a reward. She had not done it knowing anyone was watching. She had done it because it was simply what you did when someone needed you. And it had come back to her. Completely. In the form of a daughter who drew the truth without knowing it was the truth. In the form of a man who had watched from the end of the corridor and remembered her name. In the form of this restaurant in Peckham on a Saturday afternoon with egusi soup that was not quite her mother's ratio, but was close enough to make her eyes do something she had not expected. Are you all right? He said. Yes, she looked at him. My mother would say God works. What do you say? She thought about this honestly. I say some things have to break completely before they can be what they're supposed to be, she said. I was being broken for 6 months. I didn't know that what was breaking me was also what was going to bring me here. He looked at her. Here specifically, he said, this restaurant. Here, she looked at the table. This situation, this conversation, A man who watched me sit on a corridor floor at 2:30 a.m. and remembered my name 6 weeks later when someone tried to tell him I was something I wasn't. He was quiet. I remembered immediately, he said. Not 6 weeks later, immediately. She looked at him. The morning after I watched you sit with her, he said. I went back to my hotel and I looked up your file. I read your entire employment record. I knew who you were the next morning. And then the complaints started appearing. 3 weeks after that. She thought about the timeline. 3 weeks after he had looked up her file. 3 months of Park Sung-tae, building a case against her. 6 weeks of Min Se-ok's audit team quietly dismantling it. Her daughter sitting in a supply cupboard drawing the whole thing with a blue crayon, and a date in the corner of every page. Dara's right, she said. About what? She drew this and called it the beginning. She looked at him. I think she was right. The investigation concluded formally 10 days later. Park Sung-tae was dismissed without severance. The matter was referred to the relevant authorities regarding the data theft. His contact in the car park was identified, and the competitor company involved faced separate legal proceedings. The guest complaint file against Imani Adeyemi was cleared in its entirety. Her employment record showed 2 years and 4 months of clean service. The HR director personally delivered the formal apology letter. She read it at her kitchen table with Dara beside her eating toast and drawing the letter. At the top of the drawing, the letter that said sorry. Imani folded the letter. She looked at her daughter. You know what you did, she said. Fixed it, Dara said, without looking up from the drawing. You fixed it, Imani confirmed. Dara put down the crayon. She looked at her mother. You sat with that lady on the floor, she said. When you didn't have to, that's what started it. I just drew what was already there. Imani looked at her daughter. 5 years old, who had walked into a room full of powerful adults and said everything I was too afraid to say. Who had documented the truth for 3 months without knowing it was the truth. Who had written the date on every drawing because a grandmother in Lagos had taught her that the drawing needed to know where it belonged in time. Come here, she said. Dara came. She held her daughter the way she had held her in the school office, in the supply cupboard before the shift started, in every moment across 5 years when the world had been too much, and Dara had been the reason she could keep standing in it. You are the bravest thing I have ever done, Imani said into her daughter's hair. Dara hugged her back. I know, she said. You tell me every night. 6 weeks after the meeting. Imani was back at the hotel. Not on the cleaning floors. Min Se-ok had offered her a position, managing the guest experience team on floors 3 through 7. She had looked at the offer letter for a long time. She had called her mother. Her mother had said, take it. She had called her neighbor, who sometimes watched Dara. Her neighbor had said, obviously take it. She had looked at Dara. Dara had already drawn her in the new uniform. Date in the corner. At the top. Mama's new job. She took it. The first Saturday after her new position started, Min Se-ok brought her mother to the hotel for lunch. Not officially. Not as a formal introduction. As the thing it actually was. A woman who had been sat with on a corridor floor at 2:30 a.m., wanting to meet the person who had stayed. She arrived at the hotel in the specific elegant severity of a woman in her 70s, who had been doing what she wanted for long enough that she had stopped pretending otherwise. She looked at Imani. Imani looked at her. Something passed between them. The specific recognition of 2 women who had been on a corridor floor together and understood something from that experience that nobody else in the room could access. You stayed, the older woman said. You needed someone too, Imani said. She nodded once. The nod of someone receiving exactly the right answer. She looked at Dara, who was beside Imani, drawing book already open. This is the one who drew the evidence, she said. Yes, Imani said. She looked at Dara. You draw everything. Everything, Dara confirmed. And you always put the date. My Halmione in Lagos taught me. The woman looked at Imani. Halmione, she said. She calls all grandmothers Halmione, Imani said. She doesn't distinguish. Something moved through the older woman's expression. What's her name? She said. Your mother in Lagos. Grace, Imani said. She nodded slowly. Appropriate, she said. She looked at Min Siak. Then back at Imani. He came to this property because of your file, she said, but I told him to find you first. Imani looked at her. He told me. Did he tell you what I said exactly? That you said to find the woman and not let her disappear. She looked at her son. I said find that woman and don't let her disappear, she confirmed. He is very precise about details. She looked at Imani. He gets it from me. Dara, drawing throughout this entire exchange, held up the sketchbook. The three of them at a table. A window behind them. The city outside. At the top. The people who stayed. And that is where this story lives. Not in the HR meeting. Not in Park Sung-Ti's dismissal. Not in the formal apology letter. But in a hotel corridor at 2:30 a.m. A woman on the floor. A cleaner who came out of the room she was working and sat down beside her. Not because anyone was watching. Not because it was her job. Because someone was frightened and needed someone to stay. That one decision. That one ordinary, extraordinary decision that cost her nothing except 40 minutes on a corridor floor. Started everything that followed. The investigation that had been building for 3 months. The daughter who drew the truth without knowing it was the truth. The man at the end of the corridor who watched and remembered her name. The grandmother in Lagos who taught a 5-year-old to always write the date. The drawing that said the beginning. All of it. From one decision to stay. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your city and the time it is where you are right now. Drop a yellow heart for Dara, who wrote the date on every drawing because her Halmione in Lagos told her to. Drop a yellow heart for Imani, who sat on a corridor floor at 2:30 a.m. because someone was frightened and needed someone to stay. Drop a yellow heart for the grandmother in Lagos, who taught a child that documentation was love. Drop a yellow heart for Min Siak, who watched from the end of the corridor and remembered her name the next morning. Tell me, when Dara walked into that boardroom at 5 years old and said everything you just said about my mama is a lie, and I can prove it. Did you stop breathing? When the drawings came out and the dates matched, did you rewind it? And when Dara wrote he already knew mama was good, he just needed everyone else to know too. Tell me that didn't break you open. Share this with every woman who has been doing the right thing in corridors nobody was watching. Someone was watching. Someone always was. Subscribe to Afro-Korean Love Stories. Hit like, and we will bring you more next week. Thank you for watching.